So when you get back to this one where they want to terminate the manager, well, that may be overkill in this circumstance. So remember that there's just a range of things that could happen here. And remember this too. Change of leadership at the top is always very disruptive to an organization. So, you know, and it may be a matter of the devil you know versus who you don't know, who you're going to have coming in next. So, you know, if you make change at the top, you're going to have staff uncertainty in the interim. You may have some economic issues because now you're going to ask your staff to do things beyond what they typically do, and there may be some compensation issues there. You may have some recruitment costs if you have to get a new general manager. You may have to be looking at a severance package for the general manager. And there may be other claims as to how you go about terminating the general manager that you have to pay for, or perhaps your insurance carrier's involved. But remember, depending on what it is, remember I said earlier, how horrible is this? Then you may also be facing claims from your employees, which may have an economic value as well. So you have to weigh all those things. But the fact is, this type of hurried board meeting, you know, sort of a boom sort of approach, that's what you have to guard yourself against, because there's a lot of fallout from that. Okay, so what do? Well, you got to investigate, and you got to gather information. I think that's the best advice that you as a board member can give to your fellow board members. Don't be hasty, gather information. Now, the tendency that we all have, I think, is, you know, we want to be responsive to problems. We want to solve problems. You know, that's one reason why we got elected. You have to pull back from that a little bit. Not that you pull back and not solve the problem. It's, do you be the one to solve that problem? And I think my advice is no. In this kind of a situation, assuming that there's something there that looks serious, and remember, 3 board members, based on what they know right now, think this is worth firing somebody over. So it must be something that's really got your attention. My advice to you as board members is, you don't want to be in the middle of the investigation process yourself, because you're ultimately going to have to make a decision. And that decision is, what do we do with this person? So my advice to you is, you contact your lawyer, you either have your lawyer or an outside consultant, maybe with an HR background, do an investigation of what it is. And then with that, you get to the bottom of the facts. You have everybody who's involved is interviewed. You get a basis as a board member to have an investigation that's been fleshed out, and now you've got an opportunity to make a decision that has a rational basis to it, right? And you can tailor your decision to the situation. It may be termination, but it may be something less than that, or it may be nothing. So get that investigation done, have that report back, and then you verify what the appropriate action is, and you can say to the public, regardless of what your decision is, you can say to your employees, regardless of what the decision is, that we looked at this, this is how we came out, and here's why. And what could that action be? It could be, well, it could be nothing, right? You may determine that there's nothing there. It could be termination, or it could be anything in between. So it might mean that you modify your goals or the performance for the general manager. Or it could be that you decide there's something going on here in this employee environment. We're going to hire a facilitator to have we're going to hire George to come in. Well, maybe you don't want to.
Yeah, don't go there.
We're going to hire someone like George to come in and do some all-employee facilitation to try to get to some of these issues. It may result in some policy changes. So all those things are part of the spectrum of the decision. So this is kind of my speech part here now. Like the other part wasn't a speech. But this is part of my speech. Yeah, this is am I convincing anybody? Right.
I feel like a juror over here.
I think that, you know, remember this, I think goes back to your 101 presentation. Remember what the board does. You set policy. You need to be clear to your general manager about your goals and your expectations and what that performance is going to be. You have to let the general manager manage with the authority that you delegate to that person and not micromanage. On the other hand, and this is where it gets a little tricky, but you have to hold your manager accountable. And you have to observe that person, you got to train that person, you got to correct that person. You have to have regular performance reviews. That's something that we were touching on earlier. And then finally, if issues like this come up, you incorporate them maybe into a behavior modification. You haven't terminated them, but you want that person to have that behavior modification. It's now in the goals. If they don't do it, well, that's it. You've gone through a process, you've warned them, you've made it part of their performance review. And remember that if you don't get the change you want, then that's when it's time to make the change. But all to say, take your time, investigate it, and then make a rational decision and be able to explain that decision.
All right, thanks. Anybody else want to add anything?
Actually, I've followed into, with my interim work through special districts, a couple scenarios that this could have been happening. But one of the things that, Clark touched it real well, and is make sure, you know, if you have special districts, you check with pre-loss legal. There's some advice that they'll at least get you stopped. And I think that's the main thing, is to stop. Secondly, and you hit it, but this is what I'm finding, is that there wasn't clear direction to that manager in the advance. And so now he's being judged against some hidden criteria that he was unaware of. And I, as an employee, and I'm sure you would want to know the same thing, if I am not behaving or performing at the level you expect, you owe me that knowledge and give me an opportunity to be successful. And then if I can't, then we at least got some room. But what I find is that there's an expectation, but it's not been articulated to the chief or the CEO, and now they're held accountable for that. And gee, if I had any idea you wanted me to get my degree, I'd have probably gone and got it, but all of a sudden, that's what the big deal is and it could be somewhat simple, it could be somewhat complex, but as directors, we need to have that exchange with that person. And the other thing is make sure that your action is based on the behavior. And jacking the chief for the wrong reason has got, it's got long-term effect on your organization. So just make sure you do due diligence in that process, and that would be my only thing, is that we rush to judgment sometimes, and that gets us in trouble.
David?
I would just, for small districts, you may not have all the ability, you don't have an HR manager, whatever, but I think you've got to have the policy for employees, part-time, volunteer, whatever, on what to do if they do have a problem with your general manager. So you got to have that policy, and I think I heard one earlier session today that you take 2 board members and they become kind of the employment committee, if you will, or something, or the labor
Personnel
committee,
committee.
I don't know what you want to call it, you know, that they can go to, and then it's up to that committee to bring it to the board at some point. So I would just add that.
Cliff, you want to add anything?
Real brief, I thought Clark did a great job. He hit all my high points. But I think you got to think of how this is going to affect, like you said, your community and your organization. You also, I think it's be a good idea to take incremental steps, just like Clark was saying. Firing is pretty drastic. Maybe you work through it with a plan of action or whatever. But yeah, that's my main points. Is I think the key part was the the board members receive complaints from employees of dissatisfaction. You know, doesn't sound like the community's got a problem with him. It sounds, and who knows how many employees it is. So I think a 3-2 vote on something like that is a real mistake. There should be a consensus in the whole board before you go forward with a termination.
What's the key issue there? Really the key issue was this rush to judgment. You know, that those 3 board members may be correct. There may be some things going on there, but
With the process, you need to use a process to move through it. You need to use our pre-loss legal, you need to use your own legal, as well as any resource you have available to you. So you do what? You do it right. Because it might be wrong. Sir, different point?
Yeah, I was saying, I agree with everything that was said here, but I think I just summed up in 2 words. What to do is called due process.
Due process, absolutely. Yeah, good point.
All right, any other questions, comments on that scenario?
Okay, good.
Good, let's go to scenario 3. Scenario 3 is the impact of local disaster. Small district, elected board of directors. Now you may wonder why I keep putting this term in, elected, because we do have board members that are appointed by the county that still are services or could be represented here today. So I'm differentiated from that. Directors wear multiple hats. They deal with policy, which all boards do. They do some with operations because it's a small district. They can be on the board and they can volunteer in various types of districts, road districts, irrigation districts, fire districts, okay? Districts seriously impacted by natural disaster. Could have been a fire, flood, tsunami, wind. I tried to cover the whole state here. Wind, water, storm, you know, but it's a significant impact on the district as well as seriously impacted your community. So there's lots of you know, we've seen it in our communities. You see it, what's going on the East Coast right now. You drop 3 feet of snow in your community, you're gonna be significantly impacted. I don't care if you do live in Sisters. You know, it's gonna, or La Pine, it's gonna smack you, okay? There's a demand for service. Whatever your district may be, there's a demand for service, leadership, and answers about how we're gonna deal with this, okay? How does that impact your district? And what can you do to prepare for that? Cliff, you want to take the lead? You must want to because you're standing. Okay?
Yeah, like Roy, I made some bullet points here, so forgive me for checking my notes. But I think the first thing you got to think about with something like this is to be prepared and be proactive. You should be thinking about the kinds of exposures you've got and the solutions that you might use to take care of disaster in your area. We're up on the side of Mount Hood. We've got volcano, flood, and fire. Those are our 3 big deals. I guess earthquake is another one.
Hey Cliff, you don't have to worry about the volcano.
Huh? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling me that.
Yeah, you'll be in my front yard if the volcano.
Yeah. So another thing you can do there is prepare a list of resources, people in your community, organizations surrounding your community that can help out in a situation. Water districts, you could get the other water districts around, and some solutions, what you're going to do. Again, water districts, you're going to have to come up with a way to get some emergency water in there. Fire districts, you're going to need some emergency housing or, boy, I don't know, shelters. Like I said, excuse me. Okay, another point.
You want me to hold that up for you, brother?
I know. Need longer arms. No, I think okay. Everybody else has got them. I think another big point is, as far as the leadership, you should have a spokesperson or a public information officer ready to go on these kind of circumstances. That person should be connected with the operations people as well as the board and the policymakers. You should be speaking as one voice through that person. If it's appropriate, you might need a community meeting. That's a good way to get the information out. We had a big fire impacted our district a couple years ago, and we had a community meeting. It took care of a lot of the rumor mill. There was a fire kind of bearing down on our district, and there were some people that were right in the path, and there was all kinds of rumors that the whole district was going to be going up. But by having a community meeting, we had the representatives of the Forest Service, we had all the representatives of the fire department and other agencies there to answer questions, took care of a lot of that. On that particular instance, we also had our public information officer ran a Facebook page where he gave daily updates, and then any news that would come along, he'd post. Again, that was all kind of vetted by the chief and our board before anything was put out there. Another thing, the biggest impression the public will have on your district is oftentimes going to be how you handled a big deal like this. Nobody ever thinks about a sewer district or whatever until there is a problem. So it's really important you rise to the occasion. You're prepared to rise to the occasion. And I think my last point is that people aren't going to judge you about the fact that there was a disaster, but they are going to judge you very harshly about how you handled it and how you had prepared for it in the first place. So I think those are my big issues.